Welcome to the show. My name is Robin Ligon Williams. I'm the program director for the Aviation Community Cultural Center here at Fulton County. Today we are extraordinarily excited to have with us a very special guest, Colonel Ed Dwight, who is a tremendous aviator and artist. We couldn't think of a better person to come and talk about the connection between arts and aviation. We'll be right back, so please join us. Welcome to the show, Ed. It's really great that you're here with us today, especially on the occasion of our first anniversary here at the Aviation Community Cultural Center.
Well, this is fantastic, that this facility and everything and what you're trying to do here, and this is really exciting to be a part of it.
Well, we couldn't think of a better person to join us than someone who has successfully, within your career, married these two dynamic worlds of arts and aviation. Yeah. How did you get started how did you get interested in aviation, actually?
Well, I'm originally from Kansas City, and it was interesting. I lived 1 mile from Fairfax Airport, and from the time I could walk, we would, that was our daily trip. Me and my mom and my sister was walk down to the airport. And so in the very beginning, when I was a little tyke, it was just a matter of going down. They had a big goldfish pond that I was fascinated with. And when the airplanes came in, I didn't know where they were from.
Right.
And they took off, and I didn't know where they were going, So my imagination was, what's going on, and where are these people coming from? And as I got a little older, that's where I hung out. And so after a while, the guys saw me hanging out, and the airplanes in those days were used mostly for hunting. And they would leave Kansas City, Fairfax Airport, and then go to Wyoming and Colorado. And they'd come back with a dirty airplane with beer bottles all over the place, and they'd give me a nickel and a dime for cleaning the airplanes. Okay. And so after a while, I said, this nickel and dime stuff, I want to fly around. And so that was my introduction to flying, and I started living it from that point on.
So your first chance to fly a plane was at what age?
Oh, probably 7 or 8, somewhere thereabouts. Wow. And then right in the middle of this process, though, World War II started. Mm-hmm. So they closed the Fairfax and turned it into a training base for military airplanes. So they put a big wall up around it and all that kind of stuff. So everything changed then, and I had to just look at the airplanes and watch them fly over my house and all that kind of stuff, because we were right on the takeoff route and everything. So I was the other part of this thing was I was drawing before I could walk. I was, and this is a true story. I was the newspaper in those days. The comic strip was along the bottom of the newspaper rather than on one page, and so my mom would give me these things in the newspaper so I could look at the cartoons. And I started drawing the cartoons that I was looking at in the writing part above it. And so I started school when I was 2. And so Mom had me involved in, I was a school artist in kindergarten. Mom had me involved in crafts and all manner of things.
So you had a mutual love for art and aviation.
Yeah. And then I started drawing airplanes. So I decided to draw every airplane in the military inventory. And I had just perfect, so and then I started drawing birds. I got interested in birds, and I started drawing birds, and I got really, really, really upset because I thought I was the only bird artist in the world, and I read a book on Audubon, and destroyed my whole dream about drawing birds and stuff. So I stayed with art to the point where I got a full art scholarship to the Kansas City Art Institute out of high school.
But did you attend the Art Institute, or did you decide to go into the military?
No. What happened? I was trying to expand my options. So in the process of this flying thing, because I still, after the war, the war was over, and I still continued to go down to the airport and hang out with airplanes and all that kind of stuff like that. So I had been going to the library, and I had been studying military flying manuals. For what reason, didn't have anything to me being a pilot, because I just thought that was preposterous that I could ever be a pilot in the military. And so by the time I'm 16 or 17, my dad sits me down and asks me, what you going to do with your life?
Oh, wow.
And I said, I said, I'm going to be an artist. And to back it up, at 14, I opened a sign shop in Kansas City. My dad built a studio in the back of the house, and he thought it was pretty cool because he didn't have to give me an allowance, and I was making money as a kid, you know.
That's always good.
Yeah, you know. And so I had this art thing in my head, and so he sat me down and said, "What are you going to do?" I said, "I'm going to be an artist." He says, "No, you're not." He says, "You're going to engineering school." And he kept telling me all these things that you couldn't do because you're black, you know. And then at the end of the thing, he said, "Why don't you go, you fool around with them airplanes, why don't you go join the Air Force, fly airplanes?" I said, "Wait a minute. If the white folks are not going to let me do anything else, like be an artist, why in the world would they let me fly an airplane?" You know. And so anyway, I applied for pilot training, and lo and behold, I got accepted, and which kind of messed up everything.
All those training manuals that you read.
No. What happened? What really happened? I had gone through all these training manuals. At the end of the training manual is an exam. After each chapter. And I'd taken these things home, you know, I was 12, 13, 14, 15 years old, and I was just studying this, playing like I was this pilot guy, you know. So they sent me to Denver, Colorado to test for pilot training, and I missed 2 questions. They were exactly the same tests in the back of these manuals that they gave us when I went out to Lowry. And so I was the only one to pass.
You were fully prepared.
Yeah, 33 students went out there from the college I was going to, and I was the only one that passed.
That's incredible.
And so I made a lot of enemies, though they wouldn't talk to me anymore because I passed and they didn't. So then I went on to the Air Force, and you know, from there, the interesting part of it was I kept sneaking doing art from that point, because I had this thing in my head that I was flying jets. I was a fighter pilot.
Right.
And you go to parties and everything, and they say, "You're a jet pilot? Woo-wee," you know. And I said, if I start doing art, they'll think something's wrong with me, so I better not tell them.
You couldn't get rid of that. Yeah, I understand. So, but when were you chosen to go into the astronaut?
Yeah, I went in service when I was 18. That's when I went in, and I went on to finish and got my degree in aeronautical engineering after I got in service. Then I was flying all the time, flying a whole bunch of different kinds of airplanes, and I was working on. When I went to nuclear training, I got fascinated with nuclear physics. So I started working on my master's in nuclear engineering.
Okay.
And then I got a letter in the mail asking me if I wanted to go into training to be an astronaut. And I didn't apply or anything. I just got this letter.
It just came from the...
November the 4th, 1961.
Okay. So what was your thought? What was going through your head when you received that letter?
I thought it was a joke.
Really?
Yeah. I thought it was, because I was working on the wing staff, and we used to do crazy, nutty things. I mean, we're supposed to be. This is military. It's supposed to be serious, but I mean, we had access to official Air Force stationery, and we were sending guys to Alaska, you know. And the guys would go, "Oh my God, I'm being shipped to Alaska," but it was a joke, you know. And we were.
So you thought this was the same thing?
I thought I was being punked.
Had you ever imagined yourself going to space?
God, you got to be kidding. You know, the first 7 guys had been, you know, and I said, well, that's nice, you know. And it was the last thing on my bucket list. And next thing you know, I had to re-engineer my thinking about what is this all about, and I got all kind of advice. I asked for advice as to what I should do, and everybody told me to leave it alone. Don't even think about it. You know, and oh yeah.
And how'd you feel about that?
No, I was a little disconcerted about it, but in the message that I got, and finally I talked to some people in and the Pentagon and the Kennedy administration and the Urban League people who really had started all this stuff, and I was asking them questions, why is it, why? And the issue was that this is an opportunity because of the unrest of the 60s. This is an opportunity to elevate the whole black community, and if they could take what is the hottest thing going, the big advances in space and engineering and stuff, if a black could be a part of that, look how much it would raise the whole level of the racial progress.
That's a tremendous amount of pressure to put on.
Yeah, and what I didn't know is that this was a part of the president's plan, and it had to do, and what it had to do with was that the white colleges were not letting black students into the key white colleges like Purdue, the engineering schools, Purdue, MIT, University of Michigan, and they were not letting black kids in. And so Whitney Young went to the President Kennedy when he was a senator, before he was even running, and said, we have 4 military academies. And we can train, I can fill these military academies up because the white schools are not letting us in. Once they graduate from a military academy, then they can go on and get their master's degrees from any place.
Exactly.
Because they got, and so, and all of a sudden I'm a part of this thing that I'm, and so Kennedy asked Whitney Young, well, how can we do this? And Whitney said, make me a black astronaut. And it turns out that I was the guy. Wow. and so they ran me through, they vetted there were 125 black pilots in the whole world in 1961. And they evaluated these 125 black pilots. 90 of them were Tuskegee Airmen. And so, and normally, statistically, you'd get an astronaut out of that pool. Well, what they did, they made the requirement you had to be under 30. And all the Tuskegee Airmen were over 30 and 35, and so the result of that eliminated all 90 of the 125. There were 3 black pilots flying for Air France. They were left over from World War II, and so they were older, right? You had to have an engineering degree. You had to have over 1,500 hours of jet time. And if you were a military pilot, you had to have the last 3 ratings that you get every year had to be rated outstanding.
So, process of elimination.
Yeah. And I was 27 at 2,200 hours of jet time, and the last 3 OERs were rated outstanding, and so my card fell out. Okay. And that's how I ended up doing this.
And so, long story short, you didn't become an astronaut?
Well, I went through the training, and I completed the training, and that was an important part of the whole thing. And I was waiting for a mission, like everybody else. You go through training and you wait for a mission. And right in the middle of this, November the 22nd, 1963, my sponsor got killed, President Kennedy. That's right. Yeah. And so the space industry, well, first of all, the space industry didn't want me there, nor did NASA want me there. And the reason why, because they felt that if you put they had built this whole PR thing with all of these guys here, that they were heroes now, and they were special people. And that allowed the budget to open up and allowed the American people to support that budget, okay? And so if you put a black in the middle of this, which the thought at the time that blacks couldn't do the same thing the white people could do in situations like this. And if you took
the Tuskegee Airmen proved that to be incorrect.
Well, I know, but the issue is you didn't hear anything about the Tuskegee Airmen until way after this, because the Tuskegee Airmen were off the map. The war was over, and all these guys went back to doing what they were doing, right? So you got no pressure to, and the Tuskegee Airmen, this whole thing about the whole PR thing for the Tuskegee Airmen came because of they had appointed an astronaut. Now they start talking about, well, wait a minute, they were black pilots. We didn't know they were black pilots fought in World War II. But when you deal with the Tuskegee Airmen, they wouldn't let the Tuskegee Airmen fly until the war was almost over. They were trained and sitting in there, and the war was almost over, then they put them in when they thought the war was won. So
I think it's amazing that you've had this journey. We're going to take a quick break, and we're going to be right back and hear a little bit more about how you transitioned into your life as an artist. Welcome back. I'm Robin, and we're joined today with Colonel Ed Dwight, who is here joining us on the occasion of our first anniversary at the Aviation Community Cultural Center. And I just wanted to say we were opened on Juneteenth, and you were telling me earlier that you have a fabulous new work that you've created in commemoration of Juneteenth in Texas.
Yes. Yeah, it's a whole history of Texas starting in 1528. It's a 40-foot long memorial that I'm doing down there, and I've done a couple other memorials like that, and where I've had to do with the racial progress in a particular state, and therefore the Juneteenth. I started in 1528, and I studied what happened in Texas up to the emancipation. Then I have another wing that what happened to the African Americans after Juneteenth. How did they integrate into the Texas economy, culturally and socially and economically and all that kind of stuff?
Well, I think it's interesting that you've taken your own journey and your own legacy into creating now artwork that speaks to the legacy of African Americans in this country.
Well, that's fascinating because I never thought about. I went to white schools, white private schools, and Catholic schools, and I didn't have any racial consciousness until I got into the space program, because I didn't know what black people really did.
So sometimes things serve as a catalyst, right, for you to become more aware and then to take a different turn in your journey.
Yeah, they have me traveling all over the country, and all of a sudden I'm talking to all these kids, and all of a sudden I'm seeing a different, where the need is and all that kind of stuff now, and the inspiration that these kids need and everything. But I got more worried about the overall plight of blacks in America. And so I did my first major show at the High Museum.
Okay. What year was that?
This was back in the 1978, 79. I had a show at the National Park Service Museum in St. Louis, and I did the whole history of blacks and why blacks came to Colorado. And so the Park Service adopted me and gave me memorials as a Western series. And then a gentleman from Coca-Cola saw my Western and brought me to Atlanta. And I had my first show at the High Museum here. And that led to 12 public art pieces here in Atlanta. And Atlanta really got me started and got me on the map.
Well, a lot of people have seen your Hank Aaron sculpture at the Brave Stadium, but what are some of the other sculptures that they could view here in Atlanta?
Yeah, well, there's Phil Necro at the stadium also. Dr. King in Morehouse, Dr. Mays at Morehouse, Dr. Thurman at Morehouse, Dr. C.L. Harper, who was the first black principal of Atlanta over near the MARTA station, Terry Lee up at the Shepherd Spinal Rehabilitation Clinic, and as the founders of Atlanta Life Insurance Company. So it goes on. There's about 12 of them running around.
So very prolific here in Atlanta.
Yeah, I almost moved here. Because of that, I got all these enticements to move here because I was doing all this art and stuff.
But you have a foundry in Colorado,
yes.
a fairly large foundry.
Yeah, that's our headquarters. I have a studio in Los Angeles and a studio in Berkeley, California. And so I have a foundry there, but also for extra large pieces, I have a foundry that I work with in Berkeley that does that. So I have a studio out in Berkeley. So.
Well, I have been following your work for years, but didn't realize the connection. I didn't make the connection. In New Orleans, I've seen several of your jazz series sculptures. I was the director of the New Orleans Jazz Institute for some time, and very much involved in the music community there. And I noticed how beautiful these works were. And I never made the connection that you were the artist of these beautiful works, and then of course you had a connection to aviation until Shades of Blue, Dr. Von Freeman pulled my coattails and told me about this. So, but learning how to work in this particular medium and in such a large scale, tell me a little bit about your training in that.
Well, this is all about. I mean, I'm a big thing on brain stuff, about how you use your brain, all that, and one of the things that and I ran the sculpture department at the University of Denver for 4 years in the process of getting kind of an art education from the classical point of view. And in the space program, you're taught to use both sides of your brain. And so I speak to that issue a lot about how you have to develop the right side of your brain, and art does that.
When we opened the doors to this place a year ago, we were so excited about the possibilities and showing the connections between aviation and the arts. And you've spoken about using both sides of your brain. Do you think that your experience, your journey has really exemplified that?
Totally. It turns out that probably, in my test pilot class, 4 of us were accomplished artists. If you go to Google and astronauts and art, there's tons of astronauts that are doing art, and they were doing it all the time. And so, the act of flying, and that's why this flying association is so important to have a balanced side of your brain, because flying an airplane, the actual flying in the airplane, you use the right side of your brain. The digital side, the left side, is where you do the readouts that tell you what to do on the right side of your brain. So flying an airplane, learning how to fly an airplane, manipulating an airplane, you use both sides of your brain all the time. Right. And it's one of the few careers that happens, because if you're an artist or a performer or a dancer, you normally work in one brain, and if you're a lawyer or a congressman or a businessman, you work in the other side of your brain to the expense of the other. So it's best that you get trained in both the arts and the sciences, so you can keep this balance.
So this is the first of its kind, this center that celebrates the African American legacy in aviation, as well as the arts and the beauty of flight, all in one place. I think we're the first one in the world.
That's good.
And you're here now, and you represent all of that.
Thanks so much.
How do you feel about being here, and of course, things that you're getting ready to do in the future?
Well, this is what I live for. Tying all these things together, because the message isn't out there, and I can rattle on about the whole educative process, but this is perfect. What you're doing here is needed, and we need more of this all over the country.
Well, we hope you come back and see us again soon. We'd love for you to be a continuing guest here. Thanks so much for listening today. Stay with us to find out more information on how to reach us here at the Aviation Community Cultural Center. We'll be right back. Thanks for joining us today and hearing this amazing story from a very dynamic artist and aviator, Mr. Ed Dwight. For more information about the Aviation Community Cultural Center, you can click on our website at www.fultonarts.org or call us here at the center at 404-612-8600. I'm Robin Ligon Williams, Program Director for the Aviation Community Cultural Center. Thanks for joining us today, and we'll see you next time.